It's day 10 of the Karen Read trial. I am going to give you my daily recap, but today I'm going to do it in multiple parts because there's just so much stuff that's going down. You'll be happy to know that I got my nails done this weekend for Mother's Day. I hope all the moms had a fabulous Mother's Day weekend. On Friday, Brian Albert was on the stand and the prosecution rested. So then now Alan Jackson, the defense attorney, is going to be doing his cross-examination. Brian Albert seemed a little nervous today. He's also still dressed up in his very nice old person outfit, as I like to say. I don't know what he wears on a regular basis, but he looked like an old man today. The first 2 minutes of the questioning nearly broke me. It was chaos and craziness. It starts off with a few pleasantries and just kind of you've testified in a lot of trials before. And he says, yes, about 100, because he was the Boston police officer. He's the homeowner at 34 Fairview. And he is being questioned about when the last time he spoke with Lally was. I think Alan Jackson wanted to get to what kind of prep have you done for my questioning today? And he's under oath, so he's going to have to answer that. And he says, I haven't spoken to Adam Lally since April of 2022. And Jackson was like, okay. And then he was asking him about prep. And he said, during the prep for this trial, I spoke to him, and he was like, spoke to who? And he was like, Adam Lally. And he was like, well, you just told me the last time you spoke to him was April 2022. So it was a wild first 5 minutes today, but I think there were just a lot of slip-ups in general by Brian Albert. If you want to learn more about those, you can go on Twitter. People are just going nuts. So Brian Albert was actually in New York for a funeral. He was driving home with Brian Higgins in his truck that day. I think there was another police officer with them, and then they go to the Hillside bar for a drink. Brian Higgins orders food, and then Brian Albert makes his way over to the waterfall where his family is, and eventually Brian Higgins joins him. They're seen on surveillance doing their kind of fighting, sparring, situation. We don't really know what it is. It looks like play fighting to me, but Brian Albert was very strategic to make sure he doesn't say the word fighting. There's a lot of questions about that. I took notes today because there was just so much stuff going on. So in the bar on the surveillance camera, he's seen, which looks like he takes a fighter stance. There's kind of a choke moment. But ultimately he says him and Brian Higgins were fooling around at the bar. He was having fun with his friends. And you can see John O'Keefe and several other people across the table are just watching them play fight. It goes on for a couple minutes in the bar. There were a lot of questions about who was home when he got back to his house at 34 Fairview. And he says who he saw. He said that Colin was at the table. And we learned that Julie on Friday or Thursday, I believe, she said that he was in the foyer when she came inside. Brian Higgins was already there at the house when he pulled up, but he was still in his car, and he kind of maneuvered his car and parked in a different way. So they all go in the house together and they're just hanging out. He testifies that nobody ever went down to the basement that he knew of. The dog Chloe was there, and he says that yes, she was not very good with humans. And she was barking just a little bit, but I let her out. It's because she wanted to be let out. So Alan Jackson brings up the grand jury testimony quite a bit today because this is where he wants to catch Brian Albert in a lie or a change of story. So Brian Albert testified in the grand jury hearing. There were two of those, one in April 2022 and one in June of 2023. I can't remember which one it was, but he says that he has never seen or met Karen Read before. Or maybe I have met her one time, but I've never spoken to her. Those were exactly his words. But then we actually learned that 6 days prior, the Saturday night before, he actually was at the Hillside bar with his brother, Chris Albert. I believe Brian Higgins was there. I didn't write that down. But John O'Keefe was there. Karen Read was there. Some other family members. I think his wife maybe have been there. And there was a picture taken by Karen Read. So I think he's just trying to downplay the fact that he knew her, but it's very obvious for somebody to get you all together in a group photo. It was entered into evidence. You obviously know who these people are and who this woman is. So back at the house, after everybody leaves, he is also saying that his daughter left at 12:15 and now changes that to she's one of the last people to leave the house that night. So There were a lot of questions about when the dog was barking and why wasn't the dog barking when all the first responders and everybody was outside of your house if the dog sleeps in your room approximately 6 feet away from your window. He didn't have any answer for that. He said sometimes she sleeps in the closet too. So regardless, if you have a German Shepherd mix that barks at people and there's a ton of people in your front yard early morning, I can't imagine that the dog is not barking and waking you up. There was one really interesting point that I think Alan Jackson just kind of like put in his back pocket to maybe question Michael Proctor, but he says that Michael Proctor was in the house on January 29th. And up until this point, we haven't heard that there was any investigators from the state police in the house before February 3rd when all of those interviews with the family happened. There's no reports from the 29th, so this is a little controversial because if the state police were in the house the day of the crime, why is there not a report? What was he doing there? There's a point when the jury leaves the courtroom and Brian Albert's personal attorney is there. And so this is when we start learning about his cell phone, which if you don't have anything to hide, don't get rid of your phone, first of all. So that it just looks very suspicious to me. As somebody who claims I have nothing to hide, there's no reason I have anything to lie about, why do you get rid of your phone? So basically the jury is out. We learned that Brian Albert got rid of his cell phone one day prior to the order that he needed to preserve his cell phone. So there's basically a conference call with Jen McCabe, all of these people that are involved in this case, and that happens on September 23rd. Well, on the 22nd, he actually went and got a new phone. So his phone and data has been destroyed. It's like reset to factory settings. He says, my phone was not destroyed. I did not know that the evidence is not going to be on the phone. Like, I thought just getting a new phone meant everything was transferred to the new phone. And as a Boston police officer for 30 years who chases fugitives, I really find that highly suspect that he doesn't know. He claims that he never got this letter ahead of September 23rd saying not to destroy or alter the phone evidence. He never tells the prosecution that he got a new phone, though. So he never really admits to destroying evidence, but it's a little sus. There were a ton of other little things that happened, and you guys can feel free to leave those in the comments, but I'm trying to just cover like the meat of what happened today. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is when he goes to bed the night of the 29th. That's the early morning hours, of the 29th. So the jury is back in for this, of course. He says that he sleeps in his bed with his wife, and they each sleep with their phones, but they're not on chargers. And he sleeps in the bed also with a pair of readers. So the phone records are brought out as evidence. He made a phone call at 2:22 a.m. To Brian Higgins, and that phone call lasts just 1 second, and Brian Higgins calls back 17 seconds later, and the phone call is answered by Brian Albert's phone, and that phone call lasted 22 seconds. He's claiming this is a butt dial. I was actually in an intimate moment with my wife, which, as a married person, I don't know about that at 2:22 a.m., but okay. Claims he was in an intimate situation with his wife and it was a butt dial. So he actually testifies to the fact that he doesn't know that you can't place a dial a phone number, just call a contact without like unlocking your phone. He claims that, oh, maybe my phone was already unlocked. They do sleep with their phones in the bed, not plugged into the chargers. So I think I heard too that this missed call was deleted from his call log, but I don't think we know that because his phone was never retrieved. All the phone evidence was deleted. So that felt a little weird to me. What did you guys talk about? We need to know. One last thing that we saw that was really interesting was a video inside the home that leads you to the basement bulkhead door. You see the basement a little bit as well. And then the video continues out the back door, the bulkhead, and shows you the backyard, and you see the backyard for a little bit. Immediately to the left there is like a large fence that could be opened, and that takes you out right to the front yard of the Albert house, and you can see exactly where John O'Keefe's body was found. It's kind of like a straight shot there. So I think what Alan Jackson was trying to do was insinuate that something large was carried out of the basement through the bulkhead door and to that side yard. So let me know what I missed.